Hi, everyone. I'm Gold Derby News and Features Editor Ray Richmond, and I'm here today with Steve Giammaria, the supervising sound editor and mixer on the FX on Hulu hit The Bear. But I see, Steve, that you're also known as Major. Did that come from serving in the armed services or something else?
No. My clients sometimes are disappointed when they meet me that I'm not a grizzled war veteran. But I started here at Sound Lounge in 2006, so about 17 years ago, in the machine room. And the machine room manager's name is also Steve, so he got to name me out of practicality. He named me Major. He still won't tell me why, and it kind of stuck. So at a certain point, I had to lean into it.
All right, Major. But I'll still probably call you Steve.
Ah,
Um,
either way.
Congratulations on your pair of Emmy nominations for sound editing and mixing on the show. Um, this is such an intense series and so painstakingly crafted, and the sound really adds so much to the mix and helping make everything feel super chaotic. How did the creator showrunner Chris Storer prepare you for what you were going to face when you first came on board for season one?
Yeah, I mean they had a very clear plan in mind, which is refreshing. We weren't sound was not an afterthought in this show for sure. You have to have it on the page. You have to have it during production and in picture editorial. So, the episodes that we got, there was a clear structure there of like, okay, there's gonna be chaos in this scene. We want this sound element to drive it, that sort of thing. So it was temped out fairly well by the picture editors and their team. And then we just, went from there to elevate it to kind of to the next level. So, but yeah, Chris was definitely very clear on this is what a kitchen sounds like, and it's got to sound chaotic. And chefs have nightmares about the ticket printer, like that sort of thing. That specificity came from him.
Yeah, that's what, I was going to talk about. I mean, maybe more than any television series I can recall, sound is used almost like a character in itself on The Bear. The heightened sound of that, as you mentioned, the order ticket printer, the whoosh of the stove burners going on, the
Hmm.
pots and
Hmm.
pans banging around. What does all that require from you?
Well, it's a lot of that is burned into production. Those are real working stoves. They're banging around pots and pans for real. And then we add to it from there. There's the Foley team, has their hands full, both matching production for them and Emix and also adding their own layers. And our sound designer, John Fuhrer, also, it's a lot of layers. And then, we'll get notes. I feel like Chris almost hears it like music. He'll be like, "Oh, after this word, there needs to be a pot clang," like that kind of thing. For him, I believe, from the notes I get from him, it seems like there's a rhythm in his head about how it should sound, and just it's always about adding more and where can we squeeze in more sound to really make it chaotic.
Yeah, it's almost like these common kitchen noises were designed to be threatening, you know, sort of like weapons that cause your heart to race. Uh,
Absolutely, yeah.
Kitchen is battlefield of war, right?
Yep. Yeah, and it's slicing and burning and all of those things just on top of each other with then alarms going off, and again that ticket printer.
That ticket printer is ever present. Yeah, you're right. I mean, have you ever had marching orders like this on a show before, or is this
Not
completely
to
unique?
this extent. I mean, the thing, I think I've said it before, in one of the first meetings we had with Chris. He said, "I want people to want to turn it off." And at first I was like, "Oh, that's a cool thing to say," but like you don't really. But I understand. I came to understand what he meant by that, by just the constant noise and the sheer. I mean, you watch it and some episodes are like a panic attack, and sound really does help heighten that, whether it's the monotony of sound or just the sheer amount of it. Everyone yelling over each other and pans clanging and all of those things leading up to some sort of conclusion.
Yeah, it's almost kind of counterproductive to building an audience, right? That you want people to turn it off, but I totally get it.
Yeah.
Um, what were what would you say were the most challenging moments just for you to mix in season one?
I mean, the episode 7 review, which was the one we were nominated for, was it's all one shot, and that had its own challenges and its own I'd say opportunities. Because it's one shot, there's some different things you can do with panning dialogue that you usually can't, because normally if you're cutting between angles and stuff, you can't do as much dialogue panning as maybe you would if somebody's off screen to the left, then all of a sudden they're off screen to the right. But with a continuous shot, I was able to now with auto align post, you can use boom and lav at the same time a lot easier. So I was able to keep the boom in the middle and pan the lavs around the room. There's some moments when like Carmi is walking in and out of frame and around the camera and stuff, and I can have a little more fun with the space of the restaurant, which is pretty unique to television. Sometimes when they do a one take shot like that, it seems a little bit like a gimmick. It's like, okay, this is a cool technical flex, but like, why? In this case, it definitely added to the tension and the chaos, because I know the pace is a little bit, there's a little bit more pace there from the actors, and I feel like it really stepped up the tension of that particular episode for real. And let's see, back
And
to
it
your
didn't
original
it didn't feel
question.
like it didn't feel like a gimmick to you. I mean,
Yeah,
it
it
certainly
didn't
didn't
for
to
that
me.
one. No, I know, some people were like, I didn't realize it was Warner until like, my buddy texted me. I was just reading back through our text chain, and he's like, I was about like halfway through, and I realized it was a Warner because I was like holding my breath the whole time. It's like, yeah, it just like, it's relentless, that episode, in a good way. I think it's about as long as it should be. It's a shorter episode. But there's a lot going on there. It's scored with one continuous live track. I forget the band. It's a pretty unique episode, and there's a lot going on, and in a oneer there's not a lot of places to hide. But on the series, the more challenging scenes were honestly some of the quieter ones, in the back alley afterwards, that sort of stuff. um like I said, when 9 people are yelling, you got a lot of places to hide in terms of like, oh, that line's not quite great, and oh, we can add a pot clang over that line that doesn't sound that good. But if it's just a couple of people being quiet, a quiet moment of reflection, um, that's tougher.
Isn't that interesting? I would have thought the opposite, of course. The quiet moments are the tough ones to really capture well.
Yeah, because
Um,
yeah, you can't. I mean, that the top of was that 108, where Carmi, it's almost a oneer of Carmi having a big monologue. I mean, it's just a shot of him talking, and there's, our dialogue editor Evan Benjamin did a masterful job of that. There's, I look back at it, and there's hundreds of little edits where he cleaned up things. So you have to balance that. You don't want to take the life out of it because it's a masterful performance, but you got to have little nips and tucks, and oh, a grip dropped something, and all those little things to just make it sit and feel natural and correct. So.
but it seems tough. I mean, there have to be massive challenges for you as a sound guy and trying to thrive creatively inside all that chaos that the show is designed to generate. I mean, all the screaming and pots slamming around. I mean, how do you even just make sure everyone can be heard and the storyline is understandable?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, that's the challenge. And look, I'm a big believer in especially now, there was a flood of think pieces a few months back about how we can't hear dialogue anymore in movies and TV. And at that point, I think, we've failed at our job. I'm always dialogue first. That's the first thing that gets mixed, so I can go over and over and over it. I'm a very dialogue first mixer, so it's always brighten it. It's always, I my dialogue editors are great. You just have to keep going over it and making sure that yes, every word can be heard, even when it's 5 words at once and there's pot clangs and there's music. It's make sure it cuts through EQ wise, make sure you make space for it. It's a constant struggle. I try and go less dynamic range, which would mean, I turn my monitors down a little bit so I mix hotter. So the highs aren't as high. So you're not worried about, changing your remote volume because like, oh, this music sequence came in and it's super loud. I try and stay away from that. There's some shows on television, some more, we'll say, cinematic shows that, you just end up with the remote in your hand all night. And it's just no fun. Nobody likes that. That's the first complaint I get from people not in the industry that find out what I do. They're like, why? after the commercials are too loud, it's like, why can't the explosions be just a little quieter? So I try and take that into consideration, because I watch TV at home on my couch and I hate that too. So I
But
try
it's
and
so
not be part of the
compelling.
problem.
The sounds are so compelling on the show. I mean, it really is. When I think of the bear, this really is a testament to what you do, I think, Steve. I think of the noise, I think of the sound. The chaos is it's so intrinsic to the story itself. It may be more so than any show I've ever seen. And that's
Thank
so
you.
so that's got to be a huge testament to you. And I mean, how gratifying has it been just for you to be part of a team that brought a show with such giant buzz into being? I mean, you don't get too many of these in your career, do you?
Yeah, no, I mean, I was very, again, thankful to Chris Storer, Josh Senior, who brought me on. I've worked with them a little bit in the past, and just to get the opportunity has been great. And it's all about the team. I'm the end of the line. I just try and make sure everybody else's work sings. You gotta be able to hear everything. Like, all that cacophony is great. If you can't hear the dialogue, nobody's going to care. So it's all of that. And it's fight, not fights, but disagreements in between the team. That the showrunner is the music supervisor. They've gotten a lot of praise for their music, so they want to hear it. And it's like, oh, that's great, but there's some plot points here you need to hear too. So we go back and forth on those points too. And sometimes it's as much as like, hey, let's move this pot clunk a few frames to make clear for that line, and you get them both. There's a lot of that in there.
There, when I think about it, there are huge. I mean, the pots clanging it really is a character in itself.
It is
And
for sure.
that ticket printer that's a the ticket printer should have been nominated for an Emmy. Um, you know, um, it's really hard though, Steve. I mean, for me to focus solely on season one when it's season two that's in everyone's head right now,
Sure, sure.
including mine. Was it easier to mix and edit the most recent 10 episodes since you had the blueprint in place?
Yes and no. I mean, it's a new restaurant. It's construction instead of pot noises, and a lot of that construction was baked in. They had people swinging sledgehammers off camera. They wanted that chaos cooked in. So there was a couple lines. They're like, "Hey, can you turn down that?" I'm like, "I can't. It was on set. It happened on the day. There were people throwing things around." So it's a similar chaos, and right off the bat you have a classic, bear scene with 10 people. They're writing on the pizza, the pizza box, trying to figure out what the budget is. And it's, kind of classic, okay, we're back at it. And so yeah, it was a lot of, we kind of set up the rules for the world, and then we broke them on a lot of these episodes. We go to Copenhagen, we go to a different restaurant in Chicago. Sydney has a walkabout to, with, 6 different montages of her eating, 50,000 calories in a day. It's all these, it's both classic bear episodes and also, uh, uh, trips away from that world.
Exactly. Yeah. I did wonder how Sydney was able to stay so thin eating so much, but I guess she just takes one bite.
Yeah,
Um,
sure.
you know, um, did you say sledgehammers are being
I
flung
mean,
off
I don't know if it
camera?
was actual sledgehammers, but a lot of like that first scene. Let's see, maybe it's the second scene in the first episode when they're walking through. A lot of those construction scenes, there's actual stuff being flung around, in the production track. So they went for it.
Wow. Because the actual stuff in the kitchen just isn't quite loud and chaotic enough. They need other stuff off camera too.
You need all the stuff. Yep.
Wow. Well, I have to admit, as an older guy, there were times in the beer when I had trouble understanding what was going on.
Hmm.
Um, but I guess that's part of also what makes it so powerful. It's the essence of the whole thing. Even if you miss some of the dialogue and some of the
Hmm.
intent, it's the larger picture. And I think the sound is a large part of that too.
Yeah, there's a lot of words and a lot of jargon, but like a lot of the kitchen stuff when I was doing it in season one, I'm like, I don't quite understand what the kitchen jargon is here, but from context clues, they're like, oh, okay, I get it. And then by season two, I'm a pro at all the kitchen stuff, and My wife is like, please stop saying herd and chef.
Did
Behind, corner, you know.
did you start calling your wife chef? I mean,
Yeah,
just as a
no, no, no.
as like a loving, no.
You probably would have, yeah. But yeah, no, season 2 was definitely a lot of different textures to add to the palette there with construction, and then quieter episodes. My favorite episodes, Richie's episode 207 with Forks. I mean, that one, it's rare that I actually have an emotional reaction to something I'm working on after I've seen it 1,400 times, but that episode gets me every time.
It's beautifully
Purpose.
done. It's beautifully done. I know that everyone talks about Six, of course,
Hmm.
just because, and that's the example of there's so much going on, like in the first half of that episode, and you're just
Yeah.
like, oh my God, my head is spinning. I can't even imagine what it's like to mix that.
Yeah, there's a few people talking at once there, which is good.
What, like
Uh,
seven?
yeah, something like that. And I'll shout out the production sound mixer also nominated with me, Scott D. Smith, who is outstanding out of Chicago. I mean, if you ever need to record 15 people screaming at each other, he's the guy. If he doesn't do his job well, this is impossible, especially on an episode like this. Those guest stars, you're not going to get them all back for ADR. If something gets messed up, maybe you get a couple of them. That's a big problem with the way the show is a little improvisational, and not a lot of takes. If there's overlap or whatever, you can't get these people back for ADR a lot of times, especially with guest stars like this. It's just you're not gonna get any of these people back. So he's really got one shot to get it right, and then luckily, he's obviously world class. So
Yeah.
yeah, and then it's just balancing it all. A lot of juggling in those scenes, but it's a challenge, but I think we got there.
Well, I really did, as you mentioned, learn to appreciate the quiet, comparatively quiet moments because they're
Hmm.
so noisy and
Hmm.
chaotic during the kitchen scenes. And again, so interesting that those are the toughest ones for you to mix and
Hmm.
to be a part of, just because I think I'd heard it said that the scene where uh, Carmi's doing his monologue at the end and see in episode 8 was particularly challenging
It's season 1
in season
episode.
1.
Yeah,
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 episode
yeah,
8.
yeah. It was, and it's a lot of you know we want to build that world. So there was a lot of kind of noise up top of like, oh, they're in a church basement and there's, something else going on in the other room and whatever. And we just kind of stripped it away as he starts talking, because you don't know when he starts talking that it's going to be this speech. It just kind of comes out of nowhere. And it's such a great performance. You just want to get out of the way. So it's like, okay, let's eliminate anything that's going to be distracting, clean it up so it plays, and just so you can focus on him,
Yeah,
because it's he should get an Emmy just for that. So yeah, you just want to, and at that point we're not trying to add anything, we just want to be invisible.
yeah. Understood. Well, I think with that, we're out of time. Steve
Okay,
Giammaria, congrats again on your pair of Emmy nominations. Good luck at the ceremony coming up, hopefully in September. And thanks for joining us today at Gold Derby.
thanks so much, thanks for having me.